Up or down, President Trump owns the economy, and he has a lot to be proud of. Hello, this is Robert Romano, Vice President of Public Policy with Americans for Limited Government, dailytorch.com. Hit that subscribe button. Today, we're going to be talking about the economy again and President Trump and his chances for 2020 reelection, with the numbers being what they are. And let me just say at the outset, you really can't talk down the economy. It's either doing well or it's not. And by every measure, I think that the Trump economy is pretty great. And it's certainly doing better than in 2012 when former President Barack Obama was facing re-election. So let's take a look at some of these numbers. Looking at the GDP numbers on an annual basis, you'll see that in 2018 we came in at 2.93% real GDP growth. That's inflation adjusted. And that was the best number since 2005, which was 3.51. And it edges out 2015 by a nose at 2.91%. So 2.93, that's the best economic growth we've seen in 13 years and since the financial crisis. In 2012, when former President Obama was running for re-election, the economy grew at just 2.25%. In 2011, it grew at 1.55%. These weren't great numbers heading into Obama's re-election cycle, and so 2018 on GDP, Trump wins. That's way better than where we were. And looking at some of these other numbers, unemployment is at 3.7%, and that's the lowest it's been in 50 years, since 1969, other than 2018 and 2019, when we've also hit that number with President Trump in office. And if you look at 2011, at this point in the Obama presidency, unemployment was at 9%. It was still really high. And by the time he was running for re-election, it was at 7.8%. Right now, we're at 3.7%. So on unemployment, the Trump economy is doing better than the Obama economy. Moving on, jobs created. Almost 5.2 million jobs have been created since January 2017, when President Trump took office, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics Household Survey. So looking at these numbers, you're at 157.2 million jobs, people who say they have jobs in the household survey. And at this point in the Obama presidency in July of 2011, only 139.5 million people reported having jobs, and that was actually down from January of 2009 when he came into office. So at this point in the Obama presidency, not a single job had been created, whereas President Trump can say right now his economy has already created 5.2 million jobs. Now, to be fair, the Obama economy was still shedding jobs from the financial crisis that began before he even took office. And so what do people look at heading into the re-election cycle? Well, basically that the numbers were headed in the right direction. So although unemployment was elevated in 2012, it was lower than 2011 and lower than 2010 and lower than 2009. So the American people judged it, said the numbers are going in the right direction. Same deal with employment. So the people reporting that they have jobs, that number bottomed in 2010 in December. And then from 2011 forward, it went from 139 million to 140 million. By the end of 2012, it was at 143 million. So those numbers were moving in the right direction. And so that's how people tend to judge the economy in an election year. And right now, the economy is doing just fine. Prospectively, you could speculate or predict that maybe it's going to go in a different direction, but right now the numbers are pretty good. Moving on, when you look at labor participation amongst working age adults, again, using Bureau of Labor Statistics data, labor participation among 16 to 64-year-olds peaked in 1997 at 77.4%. And so it had begun a steady decline at that point after the dot-com bubble through the 2000s and the 2010s, before it finally bottomed in 2015 at 72.7%. Now, since President Trump has come into office, since 2016, through 2018, labor participation amongst working age adults is actually up, with 2.2 million more 16 to 64-year-olds in the labor force, and labor participation rising to 73.6%. So that's really good news too. President Trump promised that he was going to bring more jobs back to the United States. That's with his tax cuts, his deregulation policy, and better trade deals. Now, looking at other metrics on wages, those are accelerating during the Trump administration, coming in at 2.7% growth in the second quarter and averaging about 2.66% since the beginning of 2017. The Obama administration, on the other hand, it only averaged 1.97% growth per quarter during those years. And so the numbers are accelerating during the Trump years. And I think that's what the American people want to see. The numbers are moving in the right direction. And so these are all major improvements. The reason Obama got reelected, again, was because the numbers were moving in the right direction after bottoming out at the end of 2009. Of course, what goes up eventually must come down, and I'll leave you with the close here. It's called a business cycle for a reason. And now some are starting to worry that we're nearing the end of that cycle. But really, you don't need to worry too much. People look at the 10-year, 2-year spread, and there was a brief inversion on August 14th and August 15th, but these were intraday trading inversions. And if you go by the daily number that's published by the St. Louis Fed, it actually did not show an inversion on the 14th that came in at 0.01. So if the inversion doesn't get registered on the daily basis, it's hard to spot a recession that follows a 10-year, 2-year inversion. Suffice to say, we're near the end of the business cycle, but an intraday trading inversion may not be a recession signal. And so the White House, Peter Navarro, he's President Trump's trade advisor. He says, quote, an inverted yield curve requires a big spread before short and long. All we have had is a flat yield curve. And I think that's correct. If you look at the recession indicator inversions that have occurred, you usually get a pretty steep inversion, something you can really spot, and it'll be sustained for days or weeks or even months. Prior to it turning positive again en route to a recession. So we may be nearing the end of the business cycle, but in terms of an inversion, here's an example. In 1994, you almost had an inversion, but afterwards it bounced upwards, and you had that's where your dot-com bubble came in the mid to late 90s. And the recession was still 6 years away or so. Now, we may be actually nearing the end of the business cycle. I think that's true. But you might not see a recession register. You might not see civilian unemployment begin to rise until after the election. So we're all speculating at this point. You can look at these, try to read these tea leaves. And make up your own mind. But voters are going to look at what's actually happening on the ground. And right now, the economy is doing really well. We had the strongest growth since 2005. In 2018, the unemployment, again, is at a 50-year low at 3.7%. So some people are going to want to look at the fact that we're nearing the end of the cycle and certain recession signals going off. They're not wrong, but it's still speculative. Those making a prediction that there might be a downturn before November 2020 will either be right or wrong. Trump owns the economy either way. That's just the way voters treat incumbents in office. So own it, Mr. President. You have a lot to be proud of. That's the commentary. This is Robert Romano, Vice President of Public Policy with Americans for Limited Government, dailytorch.com. Hit that subscribe button, ring the bell for notifications, and have a good day.